once about an eye in the sky, but now are thousands of eyes in the sky. Now drones that anybody can buy and operate within certain restrictions. There aren't very many, but you may remember the man who was drunk droning at the White House a while back, and he certainly found out what those restrictions were. But apart from that, there aren't very many. It's still an open area of law. And, well, some of those things may get sorted out on the ground in real time. Have a listen to what happened a little bit ago when a drone belonging to the startup Lucky 7 company was shooting an instructional video in Huntington Beach on a residential street, was flying a couple feet off the ground when there was a man who used his T-shirt to swat it down, smashing a $1,300 drone to the ground. Lucky Drone says it may sue. He says this was an invasion of his privacy. Here is a moment from this particular video. Have a listen.
Put that over my house. I'm gonna be up. Understand me? Hey, don't touch that! Whoa. What the hell? What the hell? I don't even think that's legal.
It's completely legal
about it.
Well, that really sums it up. Is it legal or is it not legal? It's about perception, and is your perception going to be different from mine? I asked a drone expert, a couple of months ago in my LA Times column and said, if I see one of these hovering at my window, I'm going to take a baseball bat to it. He said, look, the owner of the drone could sue you for breaking his drone while you would sue him for trespassing. So what are the provisions of the law? What is emerging as drone law, and how much needs to be practiced simply good judgment? Well, we know where that usually leads us. And give us a call at 866-893-5722. You can watch that video on the AirTalk page at kpcc.org. Maybe you've had drone encounters yourself. Maybe you own a drone and have been experimenting in what you can get away with, how far you can take it. Call us here with your drone tales at 866-893-KPCC, or again on the AirTalk page at kpcc.org. Gregory McNeal is an associate professor of law and associate professor of public policy at Pepperdine University, a drone expert who co-created AirMap. It's a software program that helps drone operators know where they are allowed to fly. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I didn't even know that, except for, I suppose, places like LAX, there were places they aren't allowed to fly.
Yeah, there are lots of places, and it's actually really pretty complex. You've got a few layers. You have federal rules, mostly addressing airports, but they also address things like national parks. And then you have a huge mixture of state and local laws that are very difficult for the average operator to keep track of. And the confusion about the mixture of laws also creates circumstances like the one we saw in this video and that we heard in the audio clip that you played at the top of the segment, where the average person who maybe has a concern about drones actually doesn't know what the law is and is sometimes taking what they think the law is into their own hands. And in that gentleman's circumstance, he was pretty much wrong on every variable.
Was that because it was a public street and because he destroyed it?
Yeah, so you hit on the two key issues, right? So this was a public street where everybody has a right to, barring some statute, everyone has a right to use the public streets equally. And then he destroyed someone's property, which no one has a right to do unless they have some justification. I think what your question sort of suggests is how would it be different if this were flying at a low altitude, like a few feet off the ground in his backyard, and that does begin to change the calculus for us. And so it's complex. The one pretty clear rule is that if you're destroying someone else's property, you're probably in trouble unless they're about to harm you significantly.
So, but harm isn't watching you and maybe videotaping you and broadcasting you to the world. Isn't that a kind of harm?
It is a type of harm, and so I would include that within the definition of harm. And the way a court would look at it would be that if you were trying to destroy someone's property, let's say if it were over your land, which was not the facts of this case, let's say it's flying at 5 feet above the ground in your backyard, and you were to disable or destroy that device, a court would weigh the harm in dollar value of the intrusion into your private area against the dollar value of the item that was destroyed, because the way the courts handle this You're allowed to take self-help so long as the self-help you engage in isn't disproportionate.
Well, let me ask you, if a person couldn't walk up to your bedroom window and look in legally, why should a drone be allowed to?
It shouldn't be allowed to, and so part of the challenge that we have is that first, do the privacy laws that would prevent someone from looking into your window address drones? I think yes, right? Someone coming up to your window, peeking into your home and looking into a private place, yes, those laws protect against that. The more ambiguous situation is where many of us believe that we have a right of privacy in our backyards, and that right of privacy in our backyards, even with a fence, with a 16-foot high fence and, tall hedgerows and trees, we might believe that we have a privacy right in our backyard from aerial observation, but many court cases have said that, aircraft flying overhead, you don't have a right of privacy against that. And so within our homes, you're on pretty safe ground. When you get outside of the home, that's where the issues about privacy become more problematic, just like what we saw when cell phones first came about.
There is a very visceral reaction to drones and the question of privacy and personal space. On the AirTalk page at kpcc.org, Adam in Alhambra says these things are intrusive and annoying. Shoot them all. Perhaps a nice capitalist solution would be to offer drone insurance. Jack in Ventura says, you fly a drone around private property without adequate explanation, then you accept what happens to your drone. He said those guys didn't have to be testing it on a private street. Actually, it was a public street with cars, kids, private property nearby. They could have gone to a park or outside urban areas and tested it. But no, they had to annoy their neighbors and got what they deserved. Paul in Huntington Beach, where this incident happened, said drones are noisy. It's like a flying lawnmower or a flying leaf blower. I live in Huntington Beach. I feel with the man who had to put up with it. Model planes at the beach, drones with flying cameras around Bolsa Chica, the dog beach, the state beach. It does get very intrusive. The noise alone is annoying. It's noise pollution and harassment. It's going to be an uphill fight, Gregory McNeal, for a lot of people. And I would expect there may be already a defense fund for this fellow who used his T-shirt to swat down this particular drone that he thought was intruding on him, especially since, as he said, he just had his identity stolen.
Yeah, so this guy has no defense. I actually think he's the least sympathetic of all the types of people who come up. If you show me someone who's concerned about their privacy in their backyard, okay, but a drunk man walking down the street with his T-shirt off who's alleging that he's concerned about his privacy, who then goes up and destroys someone's property with malice, has committed a felony. And the analogy here is, I happen to think that a lot of things are annoying, and I used to not think they were annoying, like skateboards, mopeds, the leaf blowers, and there's no circumstance under which I could take off my T-shirt or take a baseball bat and go up on a public street and start smashing a moped because I think that the noise annoys me.
That's
so but the noise issue is one that if cities wanted to ban certain devices because of the noise, cities could do that. It's just that would create a circumstance where you call the police.
Sure.
You don't take the law into your own hands.
Let me go to our listener, Denise, who's calling us from Pasadena, who has a personal experience of this. Thank you, Denise.
Hi, yeah, my mom is working on a scientific project that a religious group has been protesting, and they had made some threats against her life, and they ended up crowdsourcing a drone and following her around, and the project had to move her to a secret location and hire a couple of bodyguards because there's nothing they could legally do about the drones.
She went to the cops to see what she could do?
Well, they'd already had some security working on it, so the security said there's nothing.
And this was, like, right in her face?
Yeah.
And so now she's underground.
She's underground, yeah.
Wow. Denise, thank you for calling. This may be an extreme example, Gregory McNeal, but it is an example. And as more people, for example, if you give to a political campaign, someone says, I want to find out more about that person and sends a drone after you. This is a very rudimentary area of law that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of casework to get drafted, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's a very troubling example. It's also an example, I think, of these individuals could stalk someone, using sort of cameras. This is sort of the paparazzi issue, right?
Or
People
think
can
of
be
domestic
followed.
abuse victims.
Yeah, all of these are things that bad people are going to use technology in ways that's harmful. And so what's the balance that we as a society want to strike? Because on the other side of the equation, there are realtors who are using these to film properties. There are people who use these devices to find missing children, lost hikers. And so there are beneficial uses as well as harmful uses. And I think we have to strike a balance. I would guess that in her circumstance that stalking laws would address the type of harassment, the repeated malicious following of a person that was going on there, even though it was used with a drone. And I used to work in a prosecutor's office. I'm certain that I would find a way to be able to bring a criminal case against those individuals. And I think a civil case would also be able to be brought against them using existing laws. And so this is just like at the beginning of the millennium when people were very concerned about cameras on cell phones, and we found ways to use existing laws to address those types of conduct.
Well,
really, the most problem. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I need to wrap this up, but with a few modifications. So I expect that you have existing laws and then some other framework of technology that's going to be accommodating to that. And as you point out, we are certainly on the ground floor of regulations that have to do with drones, as we saw from that incident you heard, and you can see on the AirTalk page, the incident in Huntington Beach. All of this is just getting started. Whether you have your own drone or are being pursued by one, the AirTalk page is the place to tell us your story. Coming up, another chance to tell your story about your favorite car and your dream car, as we hear the tale of a man who wrote an account following one through a number of owners and what became of it. That's coming up after news headlines from Hetty Lynn Hurdes.